Hello everybody, hope you're having a great day. Here's Val with another video to keep your boredom at bay. Season 6 episode 1 was filled with ups and downs. Good scenes, average scenes, shocking scenes, and straight up terrible scenes. Most people agree that not much happened and that it was mainly a setup episode to remind us where everyone is. But what got people talking the most, apart from the sad lack of depth in the Dorne storyline, was all the continuity mistakes and sloppy editing that we were presented with. Let's start off with a quick one. Ed getting the Wildlings. Why can Ed leave this room and Castle Black without being stopped by anyone, while the rest of the men in that room can't leave? Well, easy. Ed left when Alistair Thorne was giving his speech, so everyone was distracted listening to him, and there was no one outside to stop Ed. And the rest of the men were better off staying in that room to defend each other in case Thorne came in to kill them. The Bolton officers and the Hounds. A lot of people noticed that before Brienne and Pod came to save Sansa and Theon, there were 4 Bolton men on horses and 2 Bolton men on foot with hounds. Brienne killed 3 of the horsemen. 1, 2, 3. Pod killed the 4th one, and Theon killed one of the footmen. After the fighting was done, a few things were missing. The hounds just disappeared. Did they run away? No. Did someone kill them? No, not possible. Weren't they only interested in attacking Sansa and Theon? Why would they all of a sudden lose interest? Why did they not attack Brienne and Podrick? In fact, they did not want to attack anybody. You see, the hounds that we have seen Ramsay use for his hunts before were these guys, and the hounds that were after Sansa and Theon were these. These are bloodhounds, which are meant for tracking down people, not killing them like these attack dogs would do. So these guys did their job. Theon did seem to think that the hounds coming for them were the ones that kill.
I've seen what his hounds do to a person. This way is better.
But they wouldn't send those after Sansa. They do need her alive. These dogs still didn't run away by choice though. They left with the one surviving Bolton officer that did run away during the fight. Remember, there were 6 Bolton officers, and Brienne, Pod, and Theon only killed 5 of them. We may see this 6th Bolton officer in the next episode back at Winterfell, bringing the news of what happened to Roose and Ramsay. And hey, before we move on, I didn't forget about the horses. I did notice they also disappeared and made for some very clear continuity errors, like when Podrick killed this guy and fell to the ground with him in between their 2 horses. In the next scene, Pod gets up and the horses are gone. Horses do get scared easily and they can run off, but Sansa and Theon could use some of those horses for the rest of their trip. So I was sure they would try to retrieve them at some point, and then I found proof in the episode 2 preview video. You see this white horse here? Brienne and Pod were riding dark brown horses. The only white horse in that scene was being ridden by a Bolton officer. Ta-da! The sand snakes on the ship. Trystain's whereabouts in this scene were very obvious to some of you, yet very confusing to the rest. Yes, he was still on the ship that we saw just off the coast of King's Landing, and HBO released this picture of the message Jaime sent to Doran, which proved that Trystain was being sent back to Dorne. But he was painting the rocks that would go on Myrcella's eyes for her funeral, so it looks like the plan was for him to leave after the funeral. It also would have made sense for him to be inside of the castle doing that, in a room that's more comfortable for a prince. But maybe Trystain felt that he wouldn't be welcome there, and decided to stay on the ship out of respect. Infiltrating the castle would have been too complicated of a plot to go with, so the Sand Snakes made use of a very conveniently written script to get rid of the prince nice and quick. But this scene was a little bit too nice and quick. All it did was confuse and anger a lot of viewers. If that conveniently written script had some sense to it, the editing was too sloppy and awkward to prove it. We all know that the last time we saw the Sand Snakes, they were standing on the dock watching the ship leave. And sure, they could have gotten on another ship and caught up to it while changing their outfits too. I mean, they didn't get on Trystain's ship until it was already at King's Landing for a while, so they did have enough time. But the point is that it's not clear at all, and we're left guessing, which can sometimes be a very unsatisfying experience for the audience. There's a few other questions, like how did they know Trystain was still on the ship? Were they going to look for him there, and if he wasn't there, move on to King's Landing next? They could have given us some hints in the dialogue, but they gave us nothing. All in all, it is possible. We can find ways to make it work, but the way it was done, the editing and storytelling left a lot to be desired. Also, where's Bronn? Was he not supposed to be seen by Cersei? Is that why he wasn't on the boat with Jaime? Did he come to shore on a separate boat later? Earlier? Too many questions. Melisandre's glamour spell. You must have seen all the fuss going on online about this supposed continuity error. But if you haven't, then to put it simply, in this scene, it's implied that the choker is what keeps Mel from showing her true age. But Mel has been seen without her choker before and she still looked as bang-worthy as always. So the entire Game of Thrones fandom is divided into two groups now. The ones who think it's clearly a continuity error and it's more proof that David and Dan just suck at what they do, and then there's the ones who are open to the idea that maybe the choker wasn't the source of the glamour spell. Some people believe this scene helps the argument against the continuity error. If you believe that Mel only looks normal to us, the viewers, and Selyse is actually seeing the true old look in Melisandre. Maybe that's why she's such a devout believer, because she can clearly see proof of Mel's powers. Or maybe just because Selyse is already a devout believer, Mel doesn't need to try as hard to make her see the lie of the illusion, so she can do it without having the necklace on. But then what made this point weaker for me is something that started with this conversation.
When I looked into the flames this morning, the Lord spoke to me. He said, "Tonight, you will have your last good bath in a long while. Make it count." A joke.
Mel tells a joke to Selyse. Selyse doesn't laugh because she doesn't get it, and then she says,
"Humor is my strength."
That's because most jokes are lies, and you're devoted to the truth.
If the lies, my lady, aren't they best avoided?
Not always.
Now, when Mel says that Selyse didn't get the joke because the joke is a lie and Selyse does not see the lies but only the truth, this would mean Selyse can see the true old Melisandre, right? Selyse then also goes on to saying lies are best avoided, which to me clearly means that at this point she doesn't know that Melisandre lies or creates illusions. Especially since right after she says that, Mel begins to explain to her, clearly for the first time, a lot of the illusions that she can create with powders and potions.
Most of these powders and potions, lies, deceptions to make men think they witnessed our Lord's power. Once they step into his light, they will see the light for what it was. A trick that led them to the truth.
Now we know for sure that Selyse is not aware of Mel's glamour powers. Maybe she has always seen Mel as old Mel. Maybe she's the only one that can see through her illusion, even when she has her necklace on. But then that argument also falls apart in the next few seconds of this scene. Mel mentions the lust potion.
And a drop of this in any man's wine will drive him wild with lust.
Selyse looks at Mel's body and asks her if she used that potion with Stannis.
Did you use it with Stannis?
No.
When Mel says no, Selyse is disappointed. This tells us that she clearly had a bit of hope that her husband only had sex with this priestess because he was under the influence of a potion, and not out of his own lust for Melisandre. When Mel says no, this means Stannis is indeed attracted to her, and didn't need a potion to sleep with her, which Selyse does her best to accept.
No act done in service of the Lord can ever be called a sin.
But you can see that it still makes her a bit sad. Mel notices this and tries to make her feel a bit better.
Don't be upset. Men never crave what they already have. It's only flesh.
And so, this is solid proof that Selyse is looking at the fake hot Melisandre, not the old one. We can actually still take something else from this scene that helps the argument against the continuity error. This scene is meant to teach us about the many ways Melisandre can create illusions, and she never once mentioned the ruby on her choker. She only mentioned powders and potions. If we look at this scene, before she puts her choker down on the table, the camera is initially very much focused on some vials that could contain powders and potions. This gives me a strong feeling that they're trying to make a connection between this scene and the scene with Selyse back in season 4. Another reason why I think they're trying to connect these two scenes is because they are actually somewhat connected in the books. One of Mel's POV chapters in A Dance with Dragons has a paragraph that sounds exactly like what she was saying to Selyse. Her sleeves were full of hidden pockets, and she checked them carefully as she did every morning to make certain all her powders were in place. Powders to turn fire green or blue or silver. Powders to make a flame roar and hiss and leap up higher than a man is tall.
A pinch of this powder in a bonfire will send a flaming column screaming towards the sky.
Powders to make smoke. A smoke for truth, a smoke for lust.
And a drop of this in any man's wine will drive him wild with lust.
A smoke for fear, and the thick black smoke that could kill a man outright.
And this one creates a black smoke that will make the brave man piss himself with fear.
You can tell they based this scene off of this chapter, right? And this is the chapter that talks about glamoring the most in the books. So David and Dan, or the scriptwriters, knew what they were doing here. They read this chapter. They knew it had to do with glamoring. So to me, this whole bathtub scene is their initial setup of foreshadowing glamoring powers. The chapter also makes it very clear that the ruby is related to glamoring, so the necklace was of extreme importance in this scene. Whatever they decided to do with it in this scene was a conscious decision made on purpose and not a mistake. If Mel isn't wearing it, then it's because they didn't want glamour to be related to the ruby. Remember, this is the show and not the books. They can change anything they want. Well, either that or the director didn't get the memo and David and Dan went out for lunch while this scene was being filmed or something, and we're gonna have to chalk it up to shit happens. Apart from this scene being based on the glamoring chapter, if you want more proof that David and Dan were already conscious of the existence of glamoring powers when they filmed this bathtub scene, just listen to this.
There have been a few hints before that Melisandre is much older than she appears. Going back to a very early conversation with George Martin about her, she's supposed to be several centuries old. So we always wanted to show her true age, and we're waiting for the right moment, and this was it for us.
Her confronting the reality of her situation, her appearance is a lie, just as the Lord of Light's supposed promises to her and messages to her were lies. At the end of episode 1, she's in a place where she really needs to look her real self in the eye and come to terms with where she stands now.
And we see the real Melisandre, which is quite feeble and aged, and yet you can see her in there.
So they knew about glamoring from the very start, they just didn't know where to include it. And they sure make it sound like Mel made herself look old because she needed to see it, and not specifically because she took off her choker, even if the ruby glue as she was doing so. Maybe that's something it always does when she takes it off. So there you go, guys. If this was truly a continuity error, then it was only because David and Dan went out for lunch at the wrong time. I'm just kidding, but I do think, in this show at least, Mel can control this power without wearing the choker around her neck. And yes, Celeste is the only person in the show to have ever seen Mel without her necklace. She left it on when she was having sex with Stannis and Gendry. Final super random thought. Why does Roose keep bringing up the baby?
And by that an heir? Well, let's hope the maces are right and Lady Walder's carrying a boy.
He knows what Ramsay is capable of. It's almost as if Roose wants Ramsay to kill Fat Walda, isn't it? Food for thought. Don't forget to leave a like. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Here's another shout out to all of my patrons, these amazing people who are helping me get closer to doing YouTube full time.